all right. I think we are officially tuned in.
Yes.
Okay.
I'm Ras Angola Tafari.
And I'm Jenna, and welcome to
People Talking Kali. Yes, live stream show about PTK, for PTK, and generally by PTK people and practitioners, a non-political platform where we could just talk about the passion of this beautiful combat system.
Yes.
We have a very special guest here tonight.
Very, very special.
Yeah, who, if you are a serious student of Pekiti Tirsia Kali, should need no introduction. However, nevertheless, Tuhon Phil Gelinas is a legend in Pekiti Tirsia in terms of our history, folklore, and just in terms of our canon. He's a true guardian of PTK, starting in the late 70s, I believe. He'll give me more specifics, mastering not only PTK, but a number of different combat systems. And to this day, he travels and teaches worldwide and is recognized virtually by all camps and all leaders of all camps of PTK. So it's a great honor to have you here, Tuhon.
Yes, welcome, Tuhon.
Well, thank you very much. The honor is definitely mine.
Yes.
How are you doing, sir? Just a quick status check and update. What's going on in your area with this whole pandemic situation?
Well, we're running to the same situation everybody else is. I mean, everybody is either, the problem is, I think in all over the world, everybody's going, well, we've been self-isolating for weeks now. We should be able to go back and make money and do stuff like that. But the reality is, okay, go back and make money and then die. But hey, that'll be okay, right?
Right. Yeah, you know, exactly. To us, we realized early on, this is a mental discipline for a lot of people. And for those people that just don't have the mental discipline to sustain and endure and adapt, this is going to be a hard time.
Well, I think it's more than that, though. Unfortunately, there seems to be a climate of, I don't trust what you're saying, so I'm going to make up my own facts. And that becomes a bit of a problem because you don't, you know, when the people become whatever, if I don't like your facts, I say, well, we're just going to get rid of you. And that's not necessarily the way to do things, because of course, if somebody, you know, if the sky is falling, then no, it doesn't, you know, if somebody's saying, well, hey, the sky is falling, well, okay, well, then it's really falling. But if it's not falling, well, we need to, you know, we need to get people who are legitimate in what they're doing. And, you know, actually, just like PTK, I mean, like I was watching some stuff today online, and the person was saying, this is a 64 attacks. And I'm going, that's very interesting. I've never seen it practiced quite like that before. And that's, you know, that's some of the most basic foundational movement. So, you know, we're not even talking about stuff that's out there and saying, okay, well, you know, I believe, and then you start going, you know, there's 8 points, and then no, realistically, this is a very, very normal system. In that it's kind of like the piano has 8 notes. It has what, 88 keys. So that means there's 11 bars on there. You can play anything on those 11 bars. The only problem is that people go, well, no, there's actually 15 bars and you just don't hear the others. You know, well, whatever. You know, the reality is it takes discipline. No matter what you do, it takes discipline. And if you're going to learn anything, you're going to have to spend the time. And it's not going to come easy simply because you have an idea. It's going to come easy because you practice a lot.
Sir, yes, sir. Okay, if you're just tuning in at the 8 o'clock hour, we're here with Tuhon Phil Gelinas. Shout out to the PTK elite from New York, Tuhon Phil, who've just signed on. That's RV and Francis and that gang, as well as Tuhon Jack Latour is live with us right now. The Nomads are with us. That's a group out also in northern New York. I say northern, meaning just outside of New York City.
Yeah, everything's north of New York City.
Everything is north of New York City. It's like 20 minutes outside of New York City, but I'm saying it's northern New York because I'm from New York. And so we just want to welcome everybody in. Tuhon just started off by saying, you know, how we're seeking for truth right now in this pandemic is very similar to how we might be seeking for truth in PTK. So Tuhon, what do you do when you, who've trained for so long and see so many different expressions of PTK? How does one discern what is truth and what isn't truth, or what is someone's expression or artistic interpretation of the system, and what's just dang lousy and should just not be taught at all? How does one differentiate?
Well, the irony of it all is that even if something is really lousy, it might work. And that's a problem, because when lousy stuff works, then we actually have to examine the roots of what we do. Are we really doing really valid stuff? I think the one thing that enabled me to, how should we say, not get baffled by the BS was the idea of actually fighting with that. When I started connecting up with, well, I'd met Eric Knaus in '81, back in New York City in '82, and then he moved out to California. And then that's when he ran into Mark Denny, and he ran into Arlen Sanford, and he won a couple of those West Coast Eskrima Society tournaments. And and then actually what happened is that I think in those days it was called Panther Productions, but Panther Productions approached him and said, "Hey, we want to do a thing on you." And he decided, well, they decided that instead of doing a single person idea, that they would have as a group idea. And then they decided to form, or not to form, but formalize the group of people that was around them sparring. They used to have something called the Wednesday night or the after midnight group on Wednesdays, a Wednesday after midnight group, I think, something like that. I was part of it, but I live far away, so sometimes you get, it's just words. And we started fighting. I go in and they'd say, "Hey, you want to fight?" And so you get one. In those days, we wore more equipment than we do now. Eric had made a helmet out of stainless steel mesh, and it looked just like a helmet for like a fencing headgear. And then because that's what he and another guy were using, and they started literally started going, okay, so let's see how little equipment we can use. Because when I first started, my first stick fighting thing was at my second seminar. I was in the way I introduced myself to Pekiti was the first time I met Tuhon Phil, and it was in Oneonta, New York, which is a place between Binghamton and Schenectady, which are two names that really define where is this place.
Now we're talking about North New York.
Yeah,
real.
Exactly. So Oneonta is a town that has a sunny, not a sunny disposition, but a State University of New York campus on there. And a guy by the name of Bujanin Mateen was a student of Grand Tuhon, but he was also a student of the SIOX. And so he kind of traversed those lines. And he would sponsor, in the summer of 1981, he sponsored a seminar in June, and one in July, and one in August, and I went to all three. And so my first weekend was there, and you just start seeing these people, and you start going, "Oh, okay, this is different, this is unusual." And so that's when I met most of the guys from Tuhon Phil's group in New York City. That's where I met Tuhon Phil himself. The second seminar, I think there's a videotape that I saw a copy of, and actually sent a copy to Bill McGrath, because he was in it. And it's like, hey man, people should have access to the information that they've had participation in creating. And it was quite amazing, because there was, the fighting that we did in those days was like, we used to wear thick body armor. I mean, when I say thick, you would die of heat prostration before you die of pain. And it was amazing, because we had those kind of like kendo headgear, but not quite. I think it was called Kempo headgear. It was like the same thing, but not quite the same construction. And we'd wear that. And the funny thing is, of course, we wore body armor, we wore headgear, but no gloves. Why? Because I'd say, well, why don't we have any gloves? Oh, well, they're not allowed hitting you in the hand. As if somehow that's what's magically going to protect them, So your hands are in front of you swinging a stick. People hit the stick. They sometimes miss the stick and hit your hand. So if you're, so of course we wore whatever kind of padding, whatever there wasn't much padding. And so later on, when the dog mother said, "Look, you don't need that padding on your body, you need it on your hands." And really, that's sort of what happened. And then, of course, the people who moved their sticks better started wearing just batting gloves. I think that was one of Eric Knaus's big advancements. He would literally wear what they call an original headgear. And it was like something that you could fit into your pocket if you want to know the truth. It was like it had already been bent up. Nowadays, when you wear a headgear, it looks like all formed and everything. But in those days, these things, you could literally collapse it and put it in your bag, and not a very big bag. So it was a thing. We were in for an evolution, and I think that kind of stuff really makes the fighting really makes the comprehension of the movements understandable. Because when somebody goes, okay, I'm going to hit your head, because I see this stuff all the time on when you look at Facebook and stuff like that, there's somebody going, okay, and they do their their form is great, but function works. Function is what teaches you how it applies. It's kind of like, look, you when you're like 11 years old and you're starting to become interested in girls, and you start going like, you start facing the idea of like, am I going to kiss? Am I going to kiss? What am I going to do? You have no idea what it is. And then when it happens, it's not exactly, and not at all what you expected, but it works. So.
If you're just tuning in, to those just tuning in, thank you again for joining us. We wanted to give some recognition to a couple of people who just commented. We have Brother Farhat from Istanbul. We have the Tortel Martial Arts Center checking in. We have Brother Daryl and Brother Ali from Chicago. And there's someone, Huang Ming Pham. Please give us the phonetic. So I know I probably butchered that name. So please phonetically let us know what that name is. But we're here with the legendary Tuhon Phil Gelinas. When I first met you, we first had the honor of meeting you at a seminar with the elites in New York. And you taught us a couple of beautiful flow patterns, but you also taught the application. And when we had trouble learning it, you were so diligent in working with every, group or team, and you made us do those moves in the sense that you said, this is how it works because I'm coming at you for real. And you have not done knife tapping for anybody out there unless you've done
right. And it's just and it was just a beautiful way to answer the question, what is truth in PTK? Well, what does it look like in application? It may even appear lousy, but if there's a time and place for it, then perhaps it could find its place in the truth. You said some things I kind of want to still unpackage, Tuhon. Okay, 1981, you had met GT at these seminars. Now, at that time, were you saying to yourself, okay, I'm committed to this PTK thing? Or was it at that kind of dog brother creation that you were finding yourself more engaged in PTK?
Well, I think, okay. In 1981 is when I took my first seminar, but I saw a Kali demonstration. When I was in California in 1980 in the springtime with my family, I also trained in a Hawaiian Filipino martial art called Kajukenbo. And there was a lot of people who practiced Kajukenbo on the West Coast. In fact, I'm one of those strange guys that, when you get to a new city, what do? You look in the yellow pages. Well, there wasn't any yellow pages nowadays, but in those days there were, you go to a place and it's the yellow page and you look inside. The first time I went to Hawaii, I didn't go to a store. I didn't go to a school. I looked at the yellow pages. What Kajukenbo schools are there? And the irony is, and when you go to Kajukenbo schools in Hawaii, it's not like there are in California. In California, I was in San Francisco and I saw there was half a dozen Kajukenbo schools. You go to Honolulu and there's one school that actually mentions that it does martial arts, because Kajukenbo is one of those styles that is what they call Garajukenbo. And Garajukenbo is a quote from Gary Sifu, or actually it's Grandmaster Gary Forbach. And most people don't teach those arts in a school, in a big school, because most people, the thing about Kajukenbo is that you don't train. It's there's a lot of Filipino type inspiration of movement, which is to say, they want you to feel it, because otherwise you're not going to know it. You're not going to know what it's like for the person, and you're not going to know what's going to reaction. So when you see a reaction in somebody's face that you've hit, you're going to go, oh, okay, so now I can go here. But if you don't get that, if you just sort of bring your hand really, really close, it's kind of, people say, well, look, it's like horseshoes and hand grenades. If it's not close, it doesn't going to work. So it's the same thing with catch gimbal. And when I was doing this catch gimbal event out in California, I was invited to go to a luau in San Diego. My wife was still to this day says, we were at your uncle's house. We didn't know anybody. My wife and daughter in those days. And my daughter was 8 months old, so she was pretty young. And my wife was my wife, and she said, okay. She let me, go off. I got into a van and we drove off. I mean, imagine going to Los Angeles, which is like 400 miles from Oakland, and then another 120 miles to San Diego. So right. we got there in the middle of the morning, and then I saw Cijo. I met Cijo in I met him in 75. Yeah, he came to Montreal the first time in 1975, and so I saw him, and it was like, oh, okay, you're gonna do a demonstration. What? So anyway, it was like that. But then part of the whole thing was that there was some Filipino martial arts demonstrations, and I got to see some stuff that was, it was just Sinawali. It was just like a bunch of kids doing that, but I could see the potential in it. And that's kind of what made me look. I started looking in Official Karate Magazine, which was because if you look in Black Belt Magazine, yeah, they have a lot of advertisements for things on the West Coast. They don't have things on the East Coast, not really. But Official Karate Magazine, which was absolutely the worst crap piece of garbage magazine you'd ever want to have, but it was from New York. So at least it was focused in on New York. And so I looked in this magazine, and this was a magazine that had actually Grand Tuhon on the cover. Mm-hmm. And the problem with this magazine, I think it was with a yellow cover, and he's got that weird kind of thing, and he's like, you could see that he's kind of like looking at the guy like, so I read the magazine, and of course, like a lot of magazines that kind of should say, when you put a story, like let's say when you have a news story, let's say all about Grand Tuhon and pictures, sometimes it doesn't, at a certain point, when you have like 5 hours left before the run time of the magazine, and somebody says, hey, can I put any more advertisements? Guess what you do? You take out the copy, because that doesn't count. That's not going to give you a penny. You can if you can put 2 or 3 more ads in there, that's kind of what you got in the old days. That was what was happening at Official Karate Magazine. It was like, it was definitely one of those, what they call a rag. Anyway.
I mean, not to interrupt the story, please continue, but to think of a time there was no online access. You had to go to a magazine, folks.
Well, yeah, that was what was available. Mm-hmm. Anyway, so in it had a little advertisement and saying, Arnis America organization, send $2 to this address. And that was the rate, that was the address of the recently deceased Greg Galan. And he was one of the guys affiliated with Pekiti Tirsia in those days. And so I sent the $2, and I got back a photocopy of the stupid article I bought in the magazine. But one small page of this little leaflet was an advertisement for this thing that Bujinin Mateen put together from Oneonta. I don't know if was there internet? I think it was more basic than you have now. But I went and researched the idea, and I said, okay, if I take a train to not to Schenectady, but after Schenectady, there's Albany. Yeah, you go to Albany. What I did is I took a train to Albany and got off, and I had to get I said, okay, I'm now going to find the bus, because the bus goes to Oneonta. It goes from Schenectady to Binghamton, and it's Oneonta is one of the stops. And so I went and did that. And the first stop was in Schenectady, right across from the train station. So I didn't do that again, because that was pretty stupid. I spent $20 on a cab ride to go from the train station to the bus station, and took a bus inland. And so I was able to save a couple of bucks the second and third time I went. But this was how it was, I went there. And there was also, on that same article, it's like when I sent the $2 in, they'll tell you this. He sent me this. Oh, by the way, you have the option. You can send $10 and get a T-shirt from this. And I said, well, no, I'm not stupid. I'm going to throw good money after bad. But but that was a very fun time that this happened. And so when I went down there, they were very nice. I mean, Tom Bizio and his group, and there was Billy McGrath, and there was AK Baraka, and there was Mike Franciotti, and there was Mike, there was Mark Saltzman, Mia Wolf, who at that time was Tom Bizio's girlfriend, and there's all sorts of people from the local group. So it was quite a full time, and it was of course, by that time, the guys who had been practicing like 8 or 9 or 10 hours a week, and we weren't up to their standards. So I mean, okay, look, I went out there. AK should have showed up at about, like, AK went out the night before and went back to Bujinen's place and slept in. And so our time was, the camp was, we worked out literally on Friday night from 6 o'clock till about midnight. And then we went to sleep wherever we were going to sleep. And we were supposed to get up the next morning at 6 o'clock and run up and down ski hills, because this was like Oneonta, which is like in the middle of the Catskills. And they had it was a ski hill in the wintertime for the city, for the university. And so that's what we did. We ran up and down ski hills, and Eddie Jaffrey was there as a CLAT special guest. So he made food for us on Sunday night. And, he showed us, he would literally jump off these counters and land on his knees on this flagstone. Imagine, those flagstone walkways. Well, this was what it was like on the inside of this cabin. And he would jump up and land on his knees. It was like, ouch, just looking at stuff. But and he had us doing squat kicks and sweeps up and down hills. Literally by Saturday or Sunday afternoon, I couldn't walk. I couldn't walk at all. I mean, when I say, when your glycogen is gone in your muscles and you have literally you cannot fire them anymore. Your muscles are too exhausted, and you've had so much lactic acid build up, and you just like, it was like, oh yeah, okay. So the next day, on the Monday, I went home, and the train station was about for this particular train was about 3 or 4 blocks from where I was living. And so my wife was there and my daughter, and so the train came in, and so I kind of went to the top of the stairwell, and I managed to get down this first step. I didn't know if I was going to be able to get off the 3rd step, because literally it's pretty long, the last step. And I kind of like did a Hail Mary jump, and I landed, and I didn't fall into the train. So I figured it was okay. And my wife went, "Oh my God, are you okay? Are you okay?" It was great. I'm going back.
If I had to ask people, like, at least the one, what was the moment where you knew that, PTK was going to be? It always is about somehow you're brought to the edge of your mind and your body some way, somehow, and then it's like, okay, this is the path I want to walk. So that weekend for you was kind of like, that kind of locked it.
Yeah, that was my watershed.
Mm-hmm.
That was, it was the thing that made me want to do it. I'm not going to land and say, wow, everything was after that was perfect. Everything,
no, right.
Nothing's perfect. If everything's perfect, then I probably wouldn't have done it, because, after 7 or 8 years, I'm like, well, this is great. What? I'm not God yet? Come on. What are you talking about? You need to be humbled in things you do, because the only way you're going to appreciate them is by the work you had to do it. I mean, if you're, it's like if you sort of snap your fingers and things happen, what on earth, what does that teach you? It just teaches you that things come too easily.
Right.
Yes, sir.
Right. Yes. Yeah.
And so what were those early drills that you were working on?
The drill I worked on AK and I were, the AK didn't happen until the middle of the day. So I was, literally, imagine the guy who walks into school the very first day. What is he going to do? Now, not only do you have to deal with me for a class, you got to deal with me for a full weekend. Now, I had martial arts experience before. I was a black belt in this catch Kempo style that I got in '75. So it wasn't like I had no experience. But at the same time, it was, just because I had some experience in a martial art meant that I could have some level of coordination. But, it's like, when you teach somebody a beginner drill, it's like, this is your left hand. Can you say that? This is your left hand. What I'd say is, hi, we're going to do a Sinawali drill. Sinawali means weaving. That means we're going to use our forehands and backhands on both sides. But you see my hands? If you hit them, I will kill you. And people go like, no, I just want you to be aware of what is in store for you if you decide to do ahead, because I'm going to walk you through this stuff and I'm going to teach you properly. But you can't decide at a certain point, because it's like that at the beginning. When people do things, they say, okay, oh, I know what this is all about. And then they, then they sort of like, they do something and they turn, and all of a sudden that $8,000 scooter you had has now been hit by that car because, oh, you mean people drive on this side? So it's kind of like that. So it's what happened is that they had this idea. Okay, you have you do a forehand, a backhand, and then you're on the other side. Forehand, backhand. I guess they call it the upper 8, the upper 6, and the heaven 6, depending on who is it and who does it. And I had spent the first hour and a half walking around. It was like I would go cut, and I would bring my weapons to the other side, and then cut. Now, on top of this, I had baby hands, right? I had no hands. I had no idea what were hands. What are hands? So you have no idea how much your hands are going to blister, because as your hands muscles or your fingers, the muscles in your fingers get weak, they stop working. And so the stick, instead of being held firmly in your grip, starts to move and rub different parts of your hand. I looked like I was wearing gloves at the end of that weekend. I had so many Band-Aids on my hand that, I mean, and I would sort of like grip the stick and hold it as tightly as I could, because you know something? It hurts if you let them move. If they move a bit, it hurts a lot. And that's literally what I would do. And so AK was given swords, and he was we had this huge field. It was on about a 15-degree incline. And it was about, I don't know, 2 or 3 times the size of a football field. And so we would go cut all around the field. And I think we got to stop by lunch. So it was like 8 in the morning when we started. It was like 4 or 5 hours later that we stopped for lunch. Yeah, but as I said, I'd gone up from like white belt to black belt in the school I was in. And so you're already attuned to that as like, the process of initiating, the techniques of a style into a new person. So that even though you've had this experience before, just doesn't mean anything. You don't have any right to say, well, I've done this before. Yeah, sure. Then you won't mind doing it again.
and I mean more woe in the sense for me of like, imagine a seminar now where you just give new people live blade and tell them to go cut live grass for 4 hours. See you at lunch. I kind of
you may do that. I don't.
Yeah.
I mean, I try to give people a sense of this is important, and it's important for you to understand why and how. And then once you have an idea of the why and how, you sort of like say, okay, and because people can hurt themselves just with a stick. I mean, I remember my first experience with Ferretti. You'd like swing the thing. Now it's great when you have your arm extended, because the stick kind of runs just here. But if you go like this, and then you think you're going to wind up and you smash yourself in the face with a stick, that is a humbling experience. So it makes you realize all of these things that, and you're thinking to yourself, wow, that hurt like heck with a piece of wood. Not being able to talk because my mouth is full of blade is a completely different thing.
Yeah,
I mean,
those reverse ones too. When I first started, I was guilty of those.
Yeah, well, and the thing is, and people will always, try. They won't see that as you pull up the reverse one, now you have to rotate your body and do it from there. They'll pull it all the way out and then do it and say, well, that's great. I just killed you 3 times. Well, what do you mean? Say, well, the whole idea is you do this and then counter me right away. But you can't do that unless you perceive the potential of what you're doing. So that's kind of why you have to say, okay, right. And then people go, they look in their eyes and they think, I've discovered something. Yeah, you and 8,000 other people. Yeah, thanks.
Definitely. I can only imagine the level of repetitious movements that kind of became just solid technique. And, even though I'm someone who's learned from a young age martial science and grew up, I can only imagine just the hours spent, just cleaning up technique. So do you feel as a Tuhon that, there's still more room to grow or things for you to discover or explore?
Oh, absolutely. There's okay. Tuhon Leslie Buck. He's a good friend of Tuhon Rommel and does an awful lot of seminars. So you guys, I know that, for example, that when the Brooklyn Elite Group has them in, they come in together, and I think there's even more people. One day when I was doing a seminar in Vermont, yes, in Burlington, Vermont, with
Brother Pat.
With Pat Gagnon. We were having dinner afterwards, and I was there, and Jeanette Ladores, an advanced instructor from New Jersey, who'd also trained with Leslie in Texas, started talking about the Juego Todo system. Now, I had received information from Tom Bizio and from other people about, what is this system? So I would say, okay, there's the abecedario method, and you have the abecedario method, the abecedario and the four wall and umbrella, and then the pangusing, and then you'd have the tercio corto, which was the 5 attacks, and the break and break out, and the tercio largo, and you'd see all these things, and you'd construct these things, and you say, okay, and then the 64 attacks would be all of these things, and you could say, oh, okay, and then I would come up to a page, then they'd say Pekiti, and then Pekiti Disarma, and then Furatia Chiquete, and Panastas Duquete, and then you go, okay, and then you'd read this word, Juego Todo, Juego Tirada. And that's what it would be, this blank space, no idea on earth what this was. So Jeanette was mentioning that, talking to somebody about it, Juego Todo, and I was like, I was kind of like, I'm not saying that I had bat ears, like, I was listening across the hall, but as soon as I heard those words issue forth from her mouth, I said, excuse me, please, I'll be back. I went over to ask her where, did you just mention Juego Todo, Juego Tirada? And she said, oh yeah. So I said, where did you hear about that? Do you know it? I mean, what is this? I said, oh, I got this from Leslie Buck. Okay, wow, Tuhon Leslie Buck. He knows this? Oh yeah. He teaches it at his school in Austin. I went, wow. I've been to Austin a bunch of times because he had that summer camp thing that was working out there. But we never, this word never came up in conversation. It was like, there was all the other stuff. So I called him up and I said, Leslie, what's going on? I hear you know Juego Todo. Yeah, I got that from Tuhon Erwin Vallarta. And in my mind, I'm going like, okay, this is something that was there in all the paperwork that I've ever seen, but had never, ever been actually expounded upon. It wasn't like, okay, this is the hidden stuff you're not going to know, or nobody practices anymore because it's so arcane. It was just like a word or two words that we're going to. So I made arrangements to go down and see Leslie, and Leslie and Leslie was very welcoming. He welcomed me into his to his school. He had a school down there which he closed last October, and he did he was also teaching what's it called, a thing where you're in a box, what's called CrossFit. He was teaching CrossFit. So he had a nice space, very, very beautiful space. But he actually presented me with 4 pages of written notes on this stuff.
Wow.
And this is the material that GT now teaches as Tri-V. And the Tri-V, but the thing is, what I like about the Juego Todo material isn't that it's better than, it is, it's Tri-V, it's just that if you know something, your motivation to teach it is similarly lit. I mean, for example, when somebody comes up to you and says, could you show me the 12 attacks in depth? You're probably going, yeah, I could, but I'm not going to. Why? Because I've done it for 18 years and I don't want to do it anymore. Yeah, you go and see instructor Joe over there, because he has enough patience to show that stuff. because you haven't bothered listening to me for that past 10 years. Whatever. So anyway, but this is the thing, is that so anyway, so I was very curious about how Erwin happened to learn this stuff, and none of the other guys, because as I said, I was learning with Tom Bizio. When Tom Bizio left the system in 1988, I continued on with Tuhon Bill, and then when Bill left PTK to basically continue under the PTI group, it was like, I totally respect his reasons for going, but they weren't my reasons for going, so I stayed. But none of those people ever manifested or said that word, those words. And then I started realizing, when I started doing it, that there was an awful lot of, actually what happened is that I had a student, I have a student now named Sebastian Poirier. He's a dog brother as well as I am. And he does something called a top load fight. He holds a stick over like this and does all of this stuff. And he had kind of naturally, he had never been exposed to this material, but he'd come up with this idea himself. So I came back after this first time being down in Texas, and I said, can you do this? Oh yeah. So then I started saying, well, what about this? And I started showing him all of this stuff, the Panastasuketi versions, and how you attack and how you do these things, and all these little bits and pieces, and how the system work together, and how you can do the top load, the shoulder load, the side load, and the down load in varying pauses, and how. And it revitalized everything I did.
Wow.
Oh man.
Wow.
There's three beautiful things about that story that I loved. Folks just tuning in, Jenna had asked Tuhon Phil, as a Tuhon, do you still learn and grow? And like a true master, sir, I'm just being humble. He said, of course, they're still learning. What I loved about that's the first thing. Second is that, and I think that's for everyone, you went out there, you saw it. Mm-hmm. You did what you had to do. You contacted, you took the journey. And I think that, there's no skipping that process on this journey for Pekiti Tirsia, where practitioners have to get out of their bubble, and they have to travel and go and train with different instructors. And it kind of brings me to this third thing, which is going to kind of be a question. There's so much in the PTK curriculum. Interestingly enough, Tuhon Ramel teaches Juego Todo, Juego Tirada. And the Brooklyn Elite, they bring Tuhon Leslie, Tuhon Ramel, and Tuhon Baldwin, Garucho Nonoi. They have this thing where you got now three Tuhons together. And
we quote 3Han as well.
The 3Han, right? And then there's like all this swapping of information during seminars, after seminars. And I remember prior to meeting you in New York, I had met you at the Grand Global Alliance they used to have in Texas, where you had all those Tuhans. And then, and it just seems like that's not that it's lost, but that's a way to truly learn the system. And just wanted to pick your brain, this idea of standardizing the curriculum or having a standard curriculum, is it possible? How far can we go?
Well, I think what you need is an awful lot the real problem, I think, is that we're always told that things are this way and not that way. And you go, well, that's true, I guess, within the context of what you think. But there are certain things. For example, I noticed there's a lot of people who practice the four wall. Okay, the four wall that was explained to me by my teacher Tom. I've always been nominally under Tuhon Gahe, but let's say Tom Bizio was the guy that was taking care of me, because in 1982, Grand Tuhon departed New York City and he moved to Big Spring, Texas. So then at that point, Tom Bizio took over my training, because it's a lot easier to get somebody up from New York City than it is from get somebody from wherever they are. Anyway, and so the four wall was always explained to me that the problem is people say there are four walls. It's actually not four walls. Cuatro canto doesn't mean four walls. It means four corners. And the thing is, a wall itself is not very strong. A wall is strong where it has a corner, and then that creates a support. And so when you go, let's say, forward, I see people who do this and they go all the way here. So they leave about, if the person swings just short of their strike, well, they're going to get their arm cut off because they block in. If you're looking at the body and that's here, and then the block is not here at the front, where the two angles meet in front of the body, it's somewhere down here. So it goes, the people will go, oh, it's like this. Say, well, if you do that and miss, you're going to get your arm cut off or something. So there's a certain things. And so, and when I, in the early days when Grand Tuhon still loved doing the dossier methodos, that was a lot of the practice was based on like the area, what you do. And he taught Tom Bizio, and Tom Bizio said, okay, look, there's all these things there. And so if you, I know a lot of times people will go and say, well, we do that stuff and it's just as good as, and it's just as whatever. But, quite honestly, unless you're willing to use how can I say this? Unless you're willing to use a unbiased third-party evaluator, you of course are going to say what you think based on what your experiences are. And for people whose experiences are, well, when I do this form, well, yeah, when you do the form, you're thinking to yourself, do I look awesome enough? Am I going to win that trophy? What am I going to do? Whereas if you're fighting, you're going to say, do I survive? Do I, did I hit him hard enough? Did I knock the sense out of it? So he's going to do that. Did I smash his fingers enough to break it so he can't hold on it anymore? These are the same things, but asked a different way. So I believe, I believe that eventually there will be, be a more collective thing. Right now it's very difficult because the people who are in charge of it are not as willing to be those people at the moment. They kind of want to be in control, and the controls are just exactly that. There are things that we ask people to do, but not necessarily demand. And so you'll see different people now. I think there's got to be at least, even, okay, let's say we look at all the people that are affiliated with Grand Tuhon. Well, we have, I'm affiliated with him. We have schools in Montreal, we have schools in Toronto, we have schools in Ottawa, we have schools in Edmonton, we have schools in Vancouver, and we have other people affiliated with that. There are right now 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There are like 5 people who have Tuhon levels in Canada, maybe 6 with me, I don't remember. And so they are nominally in the Canadian Pekiti Tirsia Association. But if you look at, what's his name? If you look at Harold Casagna, he is in Edmonton. I have another guy who's in Edmonton as well, who's trained with me for a few years. But Harold is a Tuhon, and he sort of sees himself, if you look at his crest, he's part of the Katipunan group that's under Mick Alcaraz and Jay Bataclan. So, so he does that. There's no conflict whatsoever, but it's just that now people have a tendency, I think, of maintaining their connections with the people that they feel comfortable with. Not that it's good or bad, but it's just that's what they do. And so I'm friends with a lot of people. I try to be very good friends with as many people as possible, but I can't force people to like me. You can't do that. It's like, we've all been to high school. We know what it's like.
It's funny, as a high school teacher, it's crazy to see how adults, warriors, are so much like the teenagers. And I'm guilty of it too. When I catch myself, I'm like, oh my God.
It's just a matter of, but I think being honest to yourself so that you can admit it makes it that much easier if you confront it and you meet somebody. I mean, I could say, Leslie, and say, look, Leslie and I have always gotten along. What could have possibly gone wrong for me to imagine that it would be anything else? And he was very generous. He was more generous to me than, than I was like, wow, this is awesome. Like I left with, like, with lots and lots of stuff. And, and I'm still practicing it today, to this day. But, but one of the things that I've been doing is trying to learn some of the earlier techniques, because the problem that I see with Pekiti is that when you have a view of things and it's not necessarily the full view, it's very hard to, say, for example, we go, well, this person is out, that person's out, this person's out. I would like to think to myself, if people are, there are some people for whom being out is the best thing for us. There are people who are out that maybe not so much. And I think that's going to take a little bit of, eating humble pie before it gets fixed.
Oh, wow, Tuhon, there's so much that Tuhon Phil is just unpackaging.
I don't know what my inbox is going to be like tomorrow.
No, well, it's for myself and Jenna, you kind of embody the spirit of what the PTK journey should be, which is traveling, meeting different instructors, not being caught up, in the fact, of course, you have, like you said, you may have instructors that you lean towards or you resonate with, or who birthed you, that you pay homage to. But that shouldn't inhibit your learning and your growth to study a system that is, the way I think I look at it is that there's been different generations of PTK. And so you've got, this generation, and they express the 12 métodos. And then you have this generation who's 12 métodos, but then they've got the early Tri-V, and then you have, and so to get it all, so to speak, really requires a diligence to kind of train and go out there and seek it and pick the brain.
Yeah, but if you look at it as an archaeological visit, or like, for example, you have people studying archaeology all across North America, all across Europe, all across the Orient, everywhere, every corner of the world has people who are practicing the study of archaeology. One day, way back when, I guess in the 20s or 30s, they had no idea how to read Egyptian hieroglyphics. They had no idea at all. And one day they discovered this big rock, the Rosetta Stone. Right. And the Rosetta Stone was able to give them, it was just a laundry list. But because it was a laundry list, it had different ways of convening words and phrases. So they had ancient Greek, they had Hittite, they had modern Greek, and they had Egyptian. So they had this laundry list of like, watch store socks, and so they were able to, from that, extrapolate how to read the hieroglyphs. And so there was all this stuff. And that to me, like, for example, one of the things that, I've been studying an awful lot of material that people, you just get people send you the stuff, and you have to have eyes. You can't just say, oh, wow, this is gold, because if it's fool's gold, it's fool's gold. And, it's basically iron pyrite. Yeah, it's not going to do anything. It looks like gold to people who don't know any better, but it's not gold. The reality is that if you actually find something, it should resonate with you. You should be able to do it. And even if it's not exactly 100% perfect, there should be enough information in that you can take it and it can be yours, and you can understand the basic root, and you can glom it on. You can sort of like say, okay, this is not exactly what I'm expecting to do, but it's sort of. And you start realizing that, the Espadadaga, it's supposedly, the Espadadaga and Dagadaga are very high levels. One of the reasons why I think Tuangahi actually stated in the camp in the Philippines this past year, I wasn't at there because of this COVID virus, had me transiting through Hong Kong. And if I'd gone to Hong Kong, I would have had to spend 2 weeks in quarantine in the Philippines, because Duterte said, look, if you're coming through Hong Kong or through Macau or through any city in China, you are not welcome in the Philippines. And so basically it was like, okay, so if I was to go that way, I wouldn't get there anyway. So I didn't go. But you start realizing that, hey, there's stuff that it's more to it than that. And so when you start realizing that the material that they have there, and they say, okay, so you can learn this material, you can get this. And so you start realizing, you know, that I remembered there were some drills that we did in the past. In fact, Tuhon guy back in the, I guess, mid 80s, he was showing some of the Spadadaga techniques. It was like, you know, like this Spadadaga contradas, but we didn't know them as contradas. He showed us some of the basic movements, like, okay, this is how you flow from side to side. It's kind of like a Sagan type movement. And when you've done it, then he started feeding different thrusts. So you have a low forehand thrust because your knife is in your left hand, or high forehand thrust, or you would switch out, you do all these things. And then you start realizing that once you have an understanding of how that is, then you can start interpreting the movement that you know that would go with that and say, okay, this movement fits this flow drill. I mean, people say, you know, it's kind of like for example, they show a picture of, or not a picture, but a video of Mike Tyson supposedly training for his comeback. And he has this really big, you know, this big hook, and then like 2 uppercuts, and then a bob and weave, and then he nails this guy, or doesn't nail him, but nails the focus pad holder of his hand. And you just know, like, you know, he's going, whoa, like he hasn't left. But you see, that's the thing. But I mean, if part of, you know, if you go like this and bob and do things like this, you go, oh, that would never work. You know, it doesn't take a brilliant person to see it. You just have to know. You know, it's like you could say, okay, so if I'm thrusting, if I'm deflecting, I can start understanding how this movement works. And so in that, then you start realizing, okay, in the Spadadaga program, there are 4 things. There's the seguidas. They're the attacks in that method. Then there are the disarms, which are kind of enclosed or encapsulated in the attacks, but kind of like hidden parts. But you know, you have the disarm. So because in the Spadadaga, it's really great because you actually have 3 different contrary techniques. You have pakao, which you already have, let's say both sides. I have my sword in saksak and I have my knife in saksak. So I'm basically acting this way. So I'm scooping back and forth. And then in the second set, it's supposed to be switching back and forth, but you'll have your knife primarily in pakao and the other guy is primarily in saksak. And so you have all those things. And so you have the seguidas, which are the attacks. You have the disarms, which are flowing movements, but you have to know the flow, because you can't just say, okay, I'm going to do the flow and then I'm going to do this thing completely different and disarm. What you do has to be consistent. You can't go, hey, how are you? Fuck off! And hey, yeah. What do you mean? Why are you angry at me? Because the guy said, hey, you have to be consistent. If you're going to yell, you have to yell consistently. If you're not going to yell, if you're going to be nice, then you have to be nice consistently, because people don't want to play with you when they have no consistency. So you start realizing that, okay, there's a flow drill. And then you start looking and you say, oh, okay. So I started doing this flow drill and I started applying it to some of the techniques, and you start realizing that, hey, there's no guarantee of course success, because success is something that doesn't work. It's like, well, when people say, as soon as people guarantee you success, you walk away, because there's absolutely no guarantee whatsoever. But you have a much better chance of being successful when you see that you understand how they work. Because as soon as you understand how something works, then you can say, okay, so when I see that coming, I have a reasonable chance of success to understand where it's going to go. And so then you start going, so let's say you stop it out here and then you shift it out here and then you come back and then you start with this side. Kind of like the hubad lubad drills, the hubad lubad drills, the sagang wabo drills in Pekiti, different drills that are there. And then the drills that don't make sense, they're the ones where, like, for example, at no point you should be in a situation where, you are unable to counter. You should not be, like, if the person is that good, then that's what's happened, but it's not the technique that failed, it's you. And so that's the thing of it, the same idea. So in the Espadadaga groupings, there's 3 groups. There's basically we've kind of brought them down to the modules, module 1, 2, and 3. And they all have slightly different but flow drills that are attached, because if I'm doing a technique, I can't just say, okay, you have to attack me with a right forehand, okay? Right forehand, and then I'm going to be able to do the technique. Say, well, no, I have to either, I should be like a shepherd. If I'm a shepherd between sheep, I have to say, okay, so I'm going to defend my flock from here. So the wolves are coming to attack. So I get my sheepdogs to send them over there, and then I can deal with the wolves. Or, the wolves are hiding around that bend. So I'm not going to send my sheep through because the wolves are just going to eat them. So these are the things that we do and how we do it that are the ways doing it. And so and then the Espadadaga is just a version of that. But when you have all the solo bastone stuff, and so there's all of this material, there's principles that exist, like you might have heard of Santikan. Santikan is you go through, slash, and you hit with the back. But there's other things. There's the luwak, there's trabis, there's all these things, GT goes on about, there's all these P's, panapos, and slash and thrust and terminate. And you go, yeah, that's true, but they don't mean anything without application. It's just because I got words, I'm not going to be able to explain you into your grave. I'm going to have to do something. If you attack me, I have to say, yeah, okay. And whatever I'm doing, however I'm doing it, has to be good enough and well enough practiced.
Yo. Whoa, wait, that's a journey. That's a journey right there. I love this. I love this.
A lot of those tuning in are just, again, commenting on how, you're giving beautiful explanations to, just their understanding of how to train and practice Kali.
We're talking Pekiti right here.
Yes, yes.
So, I'm just jumping in based on what you said. I'm kind of, I have stuff written down, but I want to go with this flow. To me, the way I look at it, Tuhon, is really mathematically, these are like math principles. These subsystems, these movements are kind of like methods to solve an equation. And if one method isn't working, then we have it doesn't mean the equation cannot be solved. Like you said, if the technique doesn't work per se, it doesn't mean it means either your application of the math problem was wrong, or you need to apply a whole different math problem or bridge it with another math problem. When I try to visualize it that way. When I'm by myself, like you said, working on the Espadadaga, and you get these hand motions, you get these concepts, and then it's kind of like, well, what would that look like empty hand? What does that look like double stick? Things are different. And then I develop my own understanding. Then I would seek a teacher such as yourself, some of the various Tuhons that we mentioned, and say, okay, in my own exploration here of the Espadadaga you taught me, or whatever it was, I was going down another rabbit hole. This is what I saw with double stick. This is what numerato looked like with double stick, or empty hand. And that kind of allows me to connect to the material on a personal level. So that way I'm being taught what you taught me, but then I'm trying to go in a certain direction, but then I don't lean on my own understanding, so to speak. I don't just come up with a new equation. Like you said, hey, hello, hey, fuck you. So I don't know if that's exactly what you said.
Well, it is, but it was just to make a point.
Well, it's just a way. I'm just speaking on a way I look at the process from like a math perspective. As a way that this is a sequence of movements, that can lead me to another sequence of movements, that can lead me to another sequence of movements. And all these different subsystems are different ways of solving this combative problem, so to speak. All right.
But I think an awful lot of it, though, is also, I think it's to validate some of the things that we have, because, the problem is that when you have somebody who is okay, we'll say the word Tuhon, because it's okay, someone's a Tuhon. The problem is, how do you get that person to the point where they are well enough versed in what they're doing so they can help somebody over a problem that they're having. And for example, if, let's say, because basically what a Tuhon is kind of like a tutor. That's what he should be. He should be, because I mean, we can sort of say professors in this university are this. So yeah, but really what they are is tutors, because yes, they have to teach the undergraduates, but most of them are like in classes of 300, and the papers are marked by teachers' aides. They're not really They're not really marked by, you were in university to get this, to get your level of knowledge. You had to go there, and you were probably packed in like sardines in the first couple of years, right?
Right.
Because that's the way things are.
Mhm.
And then it's only when you get to a point where you're past your master's degree and you're going for your PhD that they actually have a group of people that now try to get you to have original thought. And that's the problem, because when you need somebody who isn't just willing to have one thing, but they're willing to bring you over that hill. Say, okay, so now we have this, we're having this problem. And so you have the drill, so you have the methodologies. We'll call it, instead of calling it a flow drill, we'll call it calculus. You can, calculus brings in certain elements and certain structures of knowledge that allow you to appreciate and understand these things. And so that's the same with this. So if I'm saying, okay, I'm trying to get you to understand the Espadadaga third set or third thing. So I'm using a pakal grip and you're using a pakal grip. And there's different disarms that are not the same as the disarms that preceded it. And there's different things. And so you're there. And then you start realizing after you do the same thing, you realize there are rules. No matter what you are, you find that there are rules. There are things that, for example, when somebody attacks you this way, this is the way to counter it. You can't always guarantee you're going to counter it that way, but that's 99% of the time, that's what you're going to do. And that's going to allow you to funnel that information to another place. And so you would probably run into that possibility of countering it more easily. And then you start realizing that, because most of the time when we see stuff, we especially if it's brand new, we go, oh my God, it's so huge. Then you realize after a while that all the techniques kind of, the big thing that Tuhon Gahi likes to say is that, it's all so easy. It's so easy. So yeah, it's so easy for you because you've been there. It's kind of like, if I say to you, oh God, where's 82nd Street? I have no idea. And you go, yeah, it's over there.
Mhm.
What do you mean? Yeah, but I'm from Montreal. I've only been to New York a couple of times. I know, I don't even know where Central Park is. Is it in Manhattan still, or is it, that's not that thing. So you have no idea. So people who aren't familiar with that about the backyard are going to be going, so you have to kind of say, okay. So, a lot of times, for example, I was thinking about this today. You do certain things, you have understandings of certain, but for example, some of the worst things that could possibly happen are success at the first time. Because when you have success at your first outing, you think to yourself, well, it's, for example, if I'm shooting a bow and arrow or a rifle with a sniper rifle, and I hit a center of a bullseye at 500 or 600 yards, and I go, oh, this stuff's easy. But you can fluke. There's people say, well, he hit a bullseye in 500 yards. Yeah, but how many times can he do that? You can only do it once because it's a fluke. Every other time he's off the target. And you realize that that's the thing. It's like, just because somebody is successful doesn't mean they can repeat it and replicate it. And the same with the Kali is no different. It's a matter of going, okay, we have to repeat it so many times that if I say, okay, your name is Jenna, right? And then you go, it's like somebody goes, so if you're faking that name and you're going like, no, it's Betty, that's the thing. It's like, but it takes, it's like you're having to you're going to have to be able to maintain this story, whoever you think you are manifesting yourself as. Okay, so I'm doing this. So I'm like this. So we're going back and forth, And then I can take this thing, and then I can sort of say, okay, so here we are. And then you can start training the person so that they can do the certain things that you can make them formed in the form of the way the system was designed. And then once you have them there, then of course it's up to them to take themselves beyond that point. You know what I mean? At a certain point, people can learn all the music they want in a certain music school, but it's up to them to go out and play on their own.
Yeah.
You can't.
Wow, that's
wonderful.
It's beautiful stuff. You know, as a
Wonderful.
true instructor, how do you get the student past that stick point?
They don't want to listen.
Yeah, well, you know, you have to have gone through the process yourself.
Right,
This
right.
is such a rich conversation.
Yeah.
Tuhon, what is your favorite it's like a two-part question. What is your favorite subsystem to teach and why? And then what's the most challenging for you to teach and why?
Well, okay. My favorite subsystem at the moment is the one that I got from Leslie. It's the Juego Todo, because I'm still discovering parts about it.
Wow.
Because the thing is, you know, you look at it, and because what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to collect all the information I have of what GT taught as Tri-V, because I know it's the same thing with a different name. But the problem is, when you have Tri-V, when you have a structure, like for example, if I say, okay, could you teach me the alphabet, the English alphabet? And you say, well, there's 26 letters. And there's a bunch of ways of doing it. I mean, there's A, B, C. You know, you could sing song it through, and then there are 7 vowels that you'll find in every word. And so you'll sort of say, okay. But I mean even by the time you've done a week on with that, you've probably got people going, what? You know, so it just takes a while to get. And then you start realizing that that's the thing. No matter what you're doing, you've got this basic structure, and that basic structure, that way of interpreting that movement, you know, so then you say, okay, then you introduce other movements to it, and you say, okay, so here we are. And then you start going, because the problem that I find with so much material is that, you know, people try to reduce it to things, and rather than relate it to the larger universe around them. And the thing is, if you can say, okay, well, it's not so much that you have to say, okay, I'm doing top load and I'm doing this. So yeah, that's fine, but you have to know why. You have to know the structure. You have to. If I say, could you give me your 5 favorite vowels?
Mm-hmm.
Well, what about the other ones? You know, it's like you know, you can't just go. You can't just say that. You know, it's like, okay, give me your favorite 16 letters. It's like there's 26 of them. What do you mean? You know, you can't make it without the whole thing.
Wow. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Very beautiful.
That's beautiful response, man. I'm learning over here, Tuhon. We're learning over here.
Yeah.
It's a little quiet on the chat board. Normally people are, you know, but people are no.
I bored them to death. That's okay.
No. What by quiet, but I mean there's a lot of positive feedback about what you're saying and not a lot of questions. I was just actually doing that to segue to a question. Morgan Garrett, he had first of all, he had thanked you for a time you had worked with him, and you know, you shared with him the whole PTK landscape. His question for you though was, do you work on balisong? Do you flip the balisong?
I used to, but the balisong is actually illegal in Canada. It is in the same weapon category as a submachine gun. So I'm not saying that I would get shot down like a dog in the street if I had one, but I definitely wouldn't get across any international borders. That's for sure. So, but that's the problem with you know, weapons. It's kind of like, you know, I saw a video today with Doug Marcaida, and he was talking about, you know, the martello, the hammer, you know, those little tiny hammers, and he's going, you bring one of those because it's the most common tool. I mean, you can't, if you have a big hammer, you know, people will go, oh my gosh, and they'll shoot you. But if you have a little hammer, they'll think, here, everyone will go, oh, well, there's nothing to that. And the thing will smash your head in. Mm-hmm. So it's like this. So for me, I mean, the balisong is a wonderful tool. It teaches you an awful lot about manipulation, about finger control, all those things. But if you're not in an environment, I mean, you know, if somebody catches you, if you stab somebody with that, even if they started to stab you first, you will be the one to go to jail,
Mm,
or you'll either both go to jail or you will go to jail. But you won't get away with it because it's considered an offensive weapon. It's not necessarily an offensive weapon in some hands, but it's definitely going to be considered that way. A lot of people say, yeah, but it's kind of like the nunchaku. The nunchaku, the nunchaku that Bruce Lee did with the tabak toyak in Philippine arts, and then the Okinawan started going, wow, it's over there. But it's really, the tabak toyak wasn't it wasn't something that people thought was great. It was actually used by people who thought to themselves, wow, I can hide this and then whack them. But but if you didn't, but the thing is that it's not considered, a lot of weapons in those days, it was not considered the most deadly of weapons in the Filipino arsenal. I mean, a capulan, a bolo, a gununting, wherever, those swords were, but if you had a sword, the thing is, but did you realize the yo-yo is also a weapon in the Filipino arsenal?
Yes.
Balisong
has become like a symbolic weapon to train in the system,
Yeah, well, yeah, I mean, I've seen some of Morgan Garrett's stuff that he's put online. He does that, he lives in Portland, so that's one of those states that allows that kind of stuff. But I think that's also the home country for Benchmade, which is one of the bigger makers of the better balisongs. I remember my Kejigemo teacher was a Filipino guy, and he had a balisong, and it was basically in those days they called it a click click. What is that? You could click click. Oh, wow. Then you see there was a Bladens where you had, oh, okay. But yeah, at a point in time, it was one of those things that we had. It was, for a long time, it was not illegal in Canada. And there was a bunch of Japanese companies, I think Taylor or Seiko knives. And you would import, all of these knives, and then poof, they became illegal overnight.
Well, one of our good friends and previous guests, Agalon Lamont. I'm sorry, Mandala. I'm so sorry, Mandala.
That's okay. None of that.
Yeah.
But he says you are known for developing great Kali fighters. He is curious about your class structure. How do you split your class between the fundamentals and the sparring?
We don't. I teach Kali, and then the fighting is basically we get together and it's like to try and say, okay, this is the way you should fight. It's actually presumptuous in my mind anyway. This is you can't say, okay, to somebody, you're going to do this and you're going to become a great fighter. So same with this stuff, same with this material that we have. I will teach the traditional Filipino martial arts. I mean, it's like all the drills, all that stuff. And then once you're there, if you've done the drills to the point where your brain is completely gone, then you'll react. When people sort of say, well, how do I do the Sagong Labo in drill? Well, do it to the point where you can't think anymore when you're doing it. Then it'll work. I mean, things, the reactive movements can't react by themselves. They do not think, you can't say, well, react. Well, how? How do I react? Say, well, then you throw boiling water at them and they react really damn quickly, and you go, well, just like that. But that, but if I just sort of say, if I pretend to throw water at you and you're not really motivated to move, so you go, so, but meanwhile, if you see me taking a pot of water off the table, off a stove, and I make motion to throw it at you, you will probably move. You'll probably scream epithets at me and say what a lunatic you think I am, but you'll say that you think that I'm crazy, and you'll probably be right.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Tuhon Jack the Tour has a great question. What advice would the Tuhon Phil of today give the Yakan Phil of yesteryear?
Don't do it. Actually, very funny because in the one thing that I didn't actually go through those ranks. I kind of in 1981 I joined, and they sort of said, okay, I got all this paperwork, and they said, okay, this is what it is, And then in 1980, in 1984, they made me a Yakan guru, and I was like, oh, thank you. And then in 1988, I showed up at a seminar, and I'd won a tournament in Nashville, and he said, okay, now you're a Matasana guru. Okay, thanks. And then in 2000, Grand Tuhon sent me an email and said, it took me a long time to figure it out. He made me a Tuhon, and I had no idea. It took me, as I said, 2 weeks of looking at this email, going, what is he saying? You know, and I would take out, and then I said, oh, you have been promoted. Oh my God, no, not that. Okay, thanks very much, I guess.
You got to know GT's emails to relate to this part of the story here. Yes,
yeah, all in capitals. Yes, you're right.
Right. Yeah, but so many other people I just think this is are laughing. They're like, yes, they understand. I think we all understand, you know.
Wow. Well, we're so glad that you made that decision. Doug March had a question, and I'm not sure what it relates to. He's asking about the Big Springs camp.
Okay, Big Springs was the Texas camp in 1982 in Big Spring, Texas. It was in December.
Oh, okay.
Wow.
All right, and was that like a legendary event of some sort, or?
Well, it was the first time that Grand Tuhon actually had a week-long camp, and Guru Dan Santo was there. Fred Degerberg from the Chicago Degerberg Academy was there. Okay. Eddie Jaffrey was there. Who else? Actually, well, all of the people from New York was there. There were Tom Vizio was there. Eric Hinaus was there. Billy McGrath was there. There were so many people there, you know, that you know, it was definitely a watershed moment.
Wow. Tuhon, just a few more questions. I feel like you kind of covered it, but I still want to run through that list. Okay. Common errors instructors make when teaching PTK. Or maybe not common errors, but maybe just some blind spots that we should look out for.
Well, basically the same thing before, because if you have a real understanding of how the material you're supposed to be doing works, then you will, of course, you know, for example, if I swing at your head and you keep your hands down by here and don't move your head, and I smack you and knock you out, you'll probably not let me do that to you ever again. Now, that's not a very good way to learn. Normally what people do, you know, boxing coaches, okay, I'm going to throw a left hook at you, and you see it coming, you're going to try to wave your body around it so that you duck it, and then you do it. So, you know, a lot of times they'll go, but you know, people they'll start blending in pad work, and they go by 1, 2, 3, 4, and then they'll throw a left hook or throw a right hook, and so the person will start developing an understanding of how that. The problem is in Filipino martial arts, people start, you know, they'll feed you. Let's say in the abecedario, you'll do a blocking, a 4-wall version of the abecedario. So the abecedario 1 is strike to the head. So you'll move in forward and you'll do that. And then you'll move forward again, and then you'll move back and you move forward. But one of the things, for example, that I've done, I've given myself permission, because I'm never going to get accused of doing it wrong. I've changed some of the techniques in the 64 attacks, or actually all of the movements. And because I've made, you know, at a certain point you make a decision, and then you look at the stuff and you go, this is wrong. This is like whatever they've got, this is wrong. And it's not like, well, it's wrong, but gosh darn heck, it's ours. It's wrong. We're learning it wrong. Example, in the abecedario 12 attacks, no problem. Then we go into 4-wall. So first step, you step forward with your right foot and you block the high line there. Then you step forward again and jam the high line there. Then you step back and jam the low line middle. And then you step forward and jab the low line middle. And then you sidestep and go low in here. But I was having a hard time because people were just sort of going, people weren't getting it. For some reason, they weren't understanding the step forward, step back, step forward. So I said, okay, step forward, step back, step forward. So what I did, I said, okay, what you're going to do is you're going to step forward first. So from that position, from doing the 3 umbrellas, you do step forward with your right foot and block or jam that area. Then you're going to do a forward triangle. So you're going to bring your left foot to your right, and then step back with your left or your right foot. And so you're going to block that. And then you're going to step back with your left foot so that you create the third section of a diamond. And then you're going to step forward. You're going to do a side step or a takeoff, and then step forward with your left foot again. So you've gone right foot forward, switch, right foot back, then all the way back, lateral movement, left foot all the way back, and then left foot forward. And then, so you have a diamond shape. And so instead of, because when it comes down to it, no one's going to remember that stuff. They're going to remember how you would, because it's not like you were saying, okay, now, do you remember when you stepped forward twice? Well, you don't do that anymore. Well, do what? So I just want people to remember what the movements are. And once people remember what the movements are, then I can make the transition to teaching them what that material is. But you just, because really when it comes down to it, you're trying to free-form it anyway. And then when the next one that I changed was in the Pekiti Tirsia system. And it was funny because I won't say who, but I checked somebody else who did this, and I noticed that they, okay, basically what you do in a Pekiti Tirsia system, you're doing a Pekiti, you do a side step to the right side, you have Pekiti down to the left side, and then you same side, you Pekiti down to the left side, right side. Then you step forward your left foot, do a Pekiti up angle, and then step forward your right foot, step forward up angle. And now at this point, things change, because then you start doing double movements. So you cross back behind yourself with your left foot, you go down, and then you go up. And then you supposedly go backwards and then up. And then you do exactly the same thing that 5 and 6, going to the side. And then all of a sudden you end up, for no reason, 90 degrees from where you started. So I said, no, if something's got continuity, if you continue to do something and then something is completely out of that, there's probably a reason why. So when I was learning the alfabeto and the numerato, the one thing I started realizing was, well, it was more based on the pangasing drill than it was based on the dakampunyo. Dakampunyo is just like somebody attacks you, I do an umbrella, and then I drop down the witik, and I sidestep, and then we step back. We both step back, or we both step to the left, and we're doing it as a packing technique. And so we go 1 to the right and 2 to the left. Okay, that works. The problem was that when you're starting to do the Pekiti Tirsia method, you do the umbrella, then you go down, and then you try to thrust, but it's actually a fake with a right, basically here 1, 2. So if you do a thrust here, doing an 8 thrust, so I go 1 umbrella, 2, I drop it down with tick, and then I let it cut through, and then I thrust. Now the whole idea of the 8 thrust is to get people to react. I mean, if somebody's coming at you with a thrust, you have a choice to die or not to die. Mm-hmm. So if the dying part is good for you, well, okay, it's good for me too. But if it's not good for you, then you're going to do something, then I'm going to use that and then create the vertical part of the most letters. Most letters will have a large vertical thing like a B or a D or an H, things like that. It'll start off with a vertical line. And then people will either react or do something there. And then you Pekiti and then there. So I started realizing that, well, there's one thing that was always told me. So no matter what you do at the beginning of any number or any letter, so the letters are to attack from above the waist on the left side to the waist. And the numerato is to attack from the waist and then down to the legs. So if that's what you're going to be doing, if you're doing the counterattack, so first of all, the attacks are pretty much all the same because most of all of us are right-handed. And so you do this movement and you do the twirling bang, that's a B. Then you say, okay, so now I've got here. Well, what happens if it didn't work? Then what happens if the person attacks me? Well, then we have a thing that I was taught called dotting the I. So if you have the weapon on your left side or your right side, depends on what you do, you have to then decide you're going to engage the attack, the counterattack, and you're either going to switch it out and jab and then Pekiti, or you're going to be from already on the left side, you're going to do a Pekiti backhanded and then follow through the wrist. So it's just the Pekiti part is the thing that gives you the finisher. And so you're running left side diagonally across the person, and then you run back across the person. And you realize that, oh, okay, this is the material of the stuff that you're trying to do. And so because it's the material you're trying to do, then you say, oh, okay. So then you start realizing that the movements themselves, and then you start changing your technique, because a lot of times people say, oh, okay, that drill is what that drill is. Yeah, but that drill is only a beginning point, because the better you get, the more you realize that, you know, these words we always hear like luwak and trebis, well, they are real actual techniques. And if you don't, you know, if you can say, okay, I'm going to like 1, 2, 3, and then as the person goes here, if I do this, then all of a sudden that door to cut me in half is right there. But if I do a luwak instead and then come up, well, then I've countered you. So these are things that are not, it's not just, you know, potential, it's real things that you can train, you can teach yourself to do, and treat yourself to not let happen to you. And so these are, you know, people say, well, you know, how would you know? Say, well, look, when you cross the street, do you get hit by a truck every time? There's lots of cars coming, lots of trucks. You know, there's a reason why you don't get hit, because you've been practicing this stuff, this walking across the street stuff for quite a while. You don't walk in front of a car just because it's there. Oh, well, he had to stop. Yeah, well, I guess not today. So it's a matter of the same thing. So it's a matter of looking and say, okay, so what do we do? How do we establish that? And then you start, you know, I remember being in a time with Tuhon in 1998. We were at the Subic base, the Olongapo camp, which was that was the time where I met Tuhon Rommel, and I had what was it called? Tuhon Loki Jorgensen was there with me, and a lot of the guys. Tuhon Tim Wade was there. An awful lot of people who are going to become somebody in the Filipino martial arts in PTK were there at that time. And the CC brothers were there. A lot of these guys who went on to become instructors in Kalio Srismo, because God knows why. I wasn't there I wasn't in the Philippines I was there in 1998 and I returned in 2010. So they had 12 years to liberate themselves, and they didn't. So what the hell? Anyway, so but yeah, it's very important to see that, because you start going and say it's the same idea that we're talking about. So you try to repeat movement sets, and you try to get to the point where, you know, it's like if I say, how are you? And the first thing you don't say to me is, I want to go to the bathroom. You say, oh, I'm fine. You know, do you know where the washroom is? I'd like to go to the washroom. And you go, oh, okay. But, you know, just you start realizing that every conversation has a side, and you have to be able to, you know, you have to be able to understand how this thing works. Whatever, you know, you can't just sort of say, I kill you because you hate my mother. It's like, well, no. It's like, well, I'm sorry. That's not a good reason. That people just, you know, as soon as they see you, they're going to shoot you. It's like, well, they want to kill me. I have a right to shoot them back. So it's the same thing with this. They say, well, okay, hi, how are you? You know, or, you know, you want to go into a store and you want to buy a computer. You can't go in there and just start swearing at the guy. You know, if you do that, he's going to just get you thrown out. And now all of a sudden your computer buy is going to be for nothing. And what if you need the computer that day?
Wow. You know, it's not what I take so much to we're going to be watching this episode. It's not just math principles. PTK is a language, and it's a form of communication, metaphorically speaking.
Very much so. Very much so. Yeah.
I think that's profound.
Yes. So one of our final questions is
okay.
What do you think the future of PTK? What do you think that will be?
It's going to be. That is a very hard question to ask, simply because there's so many players in the game, and we really honestly don't know. Because realistically, like the COVID-19 virus, if at the beginning, you know, if on Christmas Day somebody said, you know, there's a virus that's on its way here from Asia, and it's going to really screw things up, okay? And you're going like, yeah, right. Yeah, not us. We're the US of A, and we don't, you know. Like, yeah, of course, yeah. All those guys protesting, and it's like, well, we want to be able to go outside. I'd like you to go outside too, but if you do and you get sick, then what are you going to do? Do I have to save you? I don't know. But I mean, that's the thing. It's like, we are, you know, what can possibly happen? You know, hopefully, you know, arts will become more important than the practitioner. And so therefore, you know, it's like realistically, you know, there's a whole lot of arts that are out there that are, you know, I mean, sometimes you see this stuff and, you know, guys are spinning their weapons and they're going like, just be, you know, it's like if your ability to do stuff is not based on, you know, it's not like a solo performance at America's Got Talent or The Voice. It's based on, you know, it's like, it's basically, can you play with this band? You know, I mean, so there you are. If you are in a situation, you know, there are all these other players. Can you play with this band? I mean, I can, you know, it, or can, you know, if you're a jazz musician, can you improvise? Can you improvise? Because if somebody is trying to improvise, you know, I remember my father was really into jazz in the 60s and 50s, and there was a guy, he really liked Thelonious Monk and he really liked all these guys. And it was like, yeah, okay. So you'd hear them and you just realize that, you know, that there was a certain amount of improvisation. But the thing is, the guys who could improvise were guys who knew the music backwards and forwards. It wasn't like they couldn't remember anything, so therefore they just made up their own stuff. It was they knew their stuff so well that they could give content and meaning to it and also play this way. So I you know, getting back to the question, I really honestly don't know, because I think we you know, we still have a lot of work to do to make this system the best it can be. And I say, I mean, because I think it would be nice to be able to get a bunch of people who are able to do this art at a really high level, and then, you know, and celebrate them at what they can do. But you know, but then we hear stories about, well, you know, that's not what my grandfather said. You know, it's like, well, maybe. I don't know for sure because I wasn't there, but okay. But you know, that's that kind of stuff is very much a part of what we have to decide.
Wow. Tuhon, we're committed to that hard work. You know, Jen, that's part of why we're doing something like this, to just connect people, find different ways to get people talking, to inspire people to seek out other instructors and try to put this whole PTK thing together. This is high level. This is a high level class right here. This is PhD type of conversation. And I think most people are following us and are on board. And the comments are coming up just very, very, very supportive. Just one, you know what, one question from the Brooklyn Elite. Is there something positive you see in PTK now that we should continue to foster?
Well, just realize that as much as we actually, you know, like we in the art sort of are probably pretty keenly aware of how awkward it is sometimes. I mean, you go into some things and, you know, you see a bunch of people and you go, oh, they're not here this time. And you kind of, you go to those people and say, what happened? Oh, my teacher called me up and told me I can't go. And you go like, it would be, you know, it kind of reminds me of that Martin Luther King speech. You know, one day it'd be nice to know, you know, when man is judged by the quality of his heart and not the color of his skin. Well, do a paraphrase and say, I wish they were right by the quality of their art and not by the, you know, the design on their sticks.
right. Yeah. So I guess in short, Brooklyn Elite, New York Elite, we got to continue to foster that brotherhood and sisterhood and the lines of communication.
Yeah.
This has been a great conversation, Tuhon. And, you know, we just want to thank you for taking the time to breaking down your ideas and your concepts and giving us your interpretation and your vision for the future.
Right. And even to, you know, bring up information that's, you know, really specific to everyone's systematic understanding. You know, you're bringing in content that, you know, we all want to learn and grow. And sometimes, you know, just having this conversation will take out a couple of the knots that students and, you know, lower level instructors have. So we really appreciate it.
Right.
Well, one of the things that I found, it's important to go a little bit further afield to find out the information.
Yeah.
And people go like, well, you know, if you go there, maybe they'll lie to you. Well, then I'll learn that. I will know that beyond a shadow of a doubt. I mean, it's not, people don't give you like, you know, the keys to their heart or whatever they want to give you. They give you aspects of what they, you know, what they trust you to do. So, you know, I'm very fortunate that I was able to work with Leslie. I was very fortunate that I was able to work with Tom Vizio. I was very fortunate I was able to work with Billy McGrath. The reality, and you know, and I say those people simply because, you know, Tom's no longer doing training. He left in '88, and Billy is doing PTK, and you know that whatever happened there, and you know, whoops. Some people don't understand. I'm busy. Anyway,
Bad phone.
okay, I'm gonna turn that off. I expected. There it is. Whoops. Oh well, maybe they'll call back, and I hope not. Anyway, yeah, it's just that the reality is that, you know, I want to learn. You know, that it's amazing the things you can learn, because some people think that the things they know are not necessary or not as good as what other people know. Slide to, no, sorry.
No, sir. We're sorry. We you know, we're going over the expected time. So thank you for even.
I wasn't expecting to hear from him either. Anyway, so yeah, but I know that we have, you know, there's amazing people. There's, you know, I have not met, you know, any group who does not have things to offer. To say that they don't have things to offer, to diminish them, to say that they are, you know, I might get a letter one day that says, or an email saying that I'm kicked out. I don't know what the heck I've ever done, but it's like, look, at a certain point, you know, I believe in how this thing is and how good it is, and we can only get better if we make it work. That's all. Yeah, it's like, you know, but you know, I've had so much fun. I've been, you know, being, you know, guest of you guys was always a great thing. You know, the seminar I taught in New York, it was awesome. You know, I've gone to, you know, I've been doing stuff. I've been invited all over the world to do this. To say that, you know, that somehow I can complain is ridiculous. I can't.
Salute. Love you, sir.
Yes.
You know, love you, and so many supporters are loving you. To your beautiful wife Ruth as well. Send our support. The New York Elite want to send the support to you and your family as well. And
say hi to everybody there for me, and a big hug and kiss to I can't remember anymore. I mean, like, I apologize but yes, for Jeanette, please hug her and say that has been, you know, just that one little word she said exploded and made my life more complete. So.
Oh, that's beautiful to hear.
Wonderful.
You know, make me want to go deeper in. And
Yes.
all we know is the form and a couple of applications, but there's so much more to study for that. So you've
Well, just realize that anything that's in Tri-V is in there, and it's just a matter of how it gets interpreted. And so don't look at something as being like, oh, it's these three movements. No, those are the three movements they showed you. It's up to you to make them bigger.
There it is.
Yes. Yes.
Tuhon, we're gonna salute out,
Yes,
sir.
you have to close on
All
that.
right.
We want to thank everybody for taking the time. Loyalty, wisdom, respect.
Life, health, and success.
Peace.
All right.
And give 1 second, sir. Let me.
Yes,